The control room hummed softly with the quiet insistence of dozens of displays and readouts, each casting a muted glow over the gathered crew. Screens lined every wall, flashing with data feeds and threat assessments, all converging to form a grim picture. The Kazori Dominion's fleet, known for its merciless conquest and unyielding expansion, was less than an hour from breaching Earth's atmosphere. Commander Tessa Lee's gaze was steady, but a flicker of tension pressed her brow as she studied the fleet's formation. Her fingers moved over her console, pulling up every detail about the approaching armada. The Kazori were as efficient as they were merciless, each ship bristling with weapons designed to intimidate and annihilate. To her right stood Dr. Ben Sharma, a reserved man with a tangle of curly hair and tired eyes, who had quietly but obsessively perfected their last-ditch hope, the viral veil. An entire fleet for a single planet, Tessa murmured, almost to herself. They must think we're desperate. Easy prey. Sharma let out a small, humorless laugh, adjusting his glasses. Or they just want to make an example of us. Show the galaxy what happens when an inferior species refuses to surrender. Tessa's lips quirked into a slight smile, though the weight of the situation was clear in her eyes. Earth had heard the warnings from alien diplomats, voices laced with pity and superiority, as if humanity's time had simply come to an end. That this Kazori fleet was descending on them like a storm, hungry for conquest and dominance, was supposedly inevitable. But Tessa had no intentions of making it easy for them. Commander! A voice broke into her thoughts. Corporal Nevis looked up from his station, his usually cheerful demeanor now replaced by a determined, sharp focus. Kazori lead ships are entering the perimeter. The room held its breath as the screen shifted, a live feed of the distant sky crackling to life. Against the stars, dark shapes emerged, sleek, angular vessels with jagged edges that seemed to slice through space itself. Each ship was forged from a dark, burnished metal that shimmered ominously, as though absorbing the light around it. They moved in a perfectly synchronized formation, a flawless display of order and intimidation. Ben, Tessa said, her voice low. Activate the veil. Run it at 40% capacity to start. Sharma nodded, his fingers flying across the keyboard, initiating a sequence that was the result of years of covert development. Viral veil was unlike any conventional weapon. It was a technological ghost, a whisper of binary code that would slip unnoticed into Kazori systems, embedding itself within their communications and navigation without a trace. And then, it would wait. As Sharma worked, Tessa's eyes drifted to the screen displaying the fleet, imagining the lives aboard those ships, the cold, calculating soldiers bred for war, the commanders who had never known defeat. They would be confident, perhaps even dismissive. To them, Earth was just another conquest, another name on a list. Transmission incoming from Kazori flagship, announced Nevis. A deep, resonant voice filled the room, each word dripping with the weight of authority and disdain. Earth Command, you have been advised to surrender. This will be your only warning. Resistance is futile. You are unprepared, under-equipped, and unmatched. The room was silent, everyone waiting for Tessa's response. She exchanged a glance with Sharma, who gave her a small nod, his signal that the viral veil was ready. Let's give them something to think about, she said quietly. Then, activating the communication line, her voice was calm, steady, and unwavering. Kazori Fleet, this is Commander Tessa Lee of the United Earth Defense. We have no intention of surrendering. You are advised to turn back. This will be your only warning. A tense silence followed. No one breathed as they waited for the reaction. The Kazori were not known for patience, much less for entertaining ultimatums from species they viewed as beneath them. The voice came back, tinged with a slight incredulity. Commander Lee, I see you are either very brave or very foolish. Very well. Consider this an education. The transmission cut off, and the silence in the control room felt like the calm before a storm. Ben? Tessa prompted, her tone revealing nothing of the adrenaline now pulsing through her veins. Sharma's face was illuminated by the green glow of his console, his fingers poised. The veil's in place. Ready to scale up to 70% on your command. Good. Tessa watched the screen, where the lead Kazori ships began their approach, weapon systems primed and calibrated, missiles aimed with clinical precision. They drew closer, gliding with terrifying speed. Initiate 70%. Sharma pressed the sequence, and the effect was immediate. On the screen, the lead Kazori ship jolted, as if it had been struck by an unseen force. The orderly formation wavered, ships edging slightly out of sync as their systems faltered. Another ship abruptly swerved, nearly colliding with its neighbor. A ripple of confusion passed through the fleet as commands became tangled, misfires caused lasers to shoot wide, and data feeds blinked erratically. Back on the control room floor, the crew watched with awe, hope creeping into their expressions. Tessa could feel the shift in morale, the belief that maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The Kazori responded with predictable fury. Their flagship re-established command, their systems rebooting in a scramble to restore order. But Tessa anticipated this. They had planned for it. Ben, raise the viral veil to maximum capacity. He didn't hesitate. The viral veil surged, its code spreading through the enemy fleet's systems like wildfire. On the screen, chaos erupted. Entire sections of the fleet's control systems blinked out, navigation spinning wildly off course. Missiles exploded within their launch bays, and shields flared, then vanished. The Kazori soldiers, unaccustomed to such disorder, were thrown into disarray. Tessa imagined them, shouting into dead comms, frantically trying to reroute power, their once mighty fleet rendered vulnerable and exposed. And amidst the chaos, Tessa made her next move. Patch me through to their lead ship again, Nevis. Yes, Commander. She took a breath, her voice steady as she addressed the Kazori once more. To the Kazori fleet, stand down. Your systems are compromised. You have no advantage here. Leave now, and no further damage will be done. The line stayed silent for a tense, stretched second, and she could almost sense the stunned bewilderment of the Kazori commander on the other end. When he finally responded, his voice held a grudging hint of uncertainty. Who are you, Earthling, to command the great Kazori? Her answer was simple, her voice unwavering. We are human. And we don't break. The transmission ended, leaving only the faint hum of machinery and the quiet, stunned breath of her crew. The Kazori fleet was in disarray, their pride shattered, their systems compromised. In those few moments, they had realized that they had misjudged Earth, badly. As she watched the flickering remnants of the Kazori ships on the screen, Tessa felt a fierce, quiet pride settle over her. They were far from finished, but in that moment, humanity had struck back, proving their strength in ways the galaxy hadn't anticipated. Across the bridge of the Kazori flagship, a low murmur of frustration grew into a collective hum of disbelief. The fleet's formation had shattered like glass, once perfect alignments now scattered across Earth's orbit. Communications flickered erratically, distorted by some unknown interference that had crept into their systems like a specter. Commander Rikael's face twisted in a scowl as he watched his seasoned soldiers stumble in confusion, struggling to regain control. They were the best in the Dominion, veterans of dozens of conquests. Yet here they were, a bare few moments into their assault, and their formidable fleet was in chaos. Rikael straightened, his tall, imposing form radiating barely contained rage. His deep-set, obsidian eyes swept over the display, picking out the source of the interference. Earth. That single blue dot was the focus of his ire, taunting him from a distance, daring him to understand what had gone wrong. Earth had been marked as a minor target, one that required minimal resources for acquisition. And yet, they were faltering. Worse, they were faltering at the hands of a species barely out of its cradle by Dominion standards. Report! He barked, his voice carrying the weight of command as he looked toward his lead technician. The technician's fingers danced over the console, his emerald-tinted skin darkening with the Kazori equivalent of a blush. Commander, we've lost primary navigational control on several vessels. Communications between ships are limited, and weapons systems are, at best, unreliable. It's as if something is actively destabilizing them. Rikael's gaze turned icy. That something is these humans. he snapped, as if merely uttering the word humans was an insult. A species barely capable of breaching their own atmosphere thinks they can cripple a Dominion fleet. Ridiculous. He clenched his jaw, his pride wounded, but he tempered it. For now, he would study his enemy. The technicians and analysts worked feverishly, their dismay evident. The Kazori were not accustomed to their weapons failing them, least of all at the hands of a species they deemed insignificant. But the thought of retreating? It was unthinkable. To abandon a mission due to technical interference would bring dishonor to them all. Meanwhile, far below, in the heart of the United Earth Defense Command Room, Tessa watched the chaotic dance of Kazori's ships. She sensed the growing unease among her crew, many of whom were fresh out of the academy and facing real battle for the first time. But amid their nerves she saw a glimmer of something else. For the first time, they were witnessing humanity's true strength, the ability to adapt and outthink even the most technologically superior foe. A young officer at the communications console hesitated, then turned to Tessa with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Commander, do you think they're starting to feel it? Starting to doubt us?" Tessa allowed herself a small smile. "I'd bet on it." Her gaze drifted to Sharma, who was still fine-tuning the viral veil, pushing it to adapt to the changing Kazori signals. "Ben, how's the veil holding?" Sharma's brow was furrowed, his fingers moving deftly across the console. "It's evolving faster than anticipated," he replied, the exhaustion in his voice laced with excitement. "Their ships are using adaptive algorithms to try to regain control, but so far, we're a step ahead. They're trained to expect brute force, not a subtle takeover of their own systems." "Good," Tessa replied, her voice unwavering. "Let's show them what subtlety can do." Back on the Kazori flagship, Rikael's frustration had transformed into something colder, more calculating. He realized that brute force would only intensify his fleet's disarray. No, this human commander was clever, maybe even brilliant. A strange realization took hold of him. He hadn't expected intelligence from these Earthlings, let alone this level of strategic finesse. With a heavy exhale, he activated a communication line to the bridge officers aboard his fleet, his tone clipped. "Shift to manual override. We are cutting off all automated systems. Human interference has corrupted our usual channels, so we'll do this the old way. I want every commander focused and attentive. These Earthlings may have their tricks, but we are Kazori." One by one, his fleet's ships began to adjust, albeit slowly and with visible difficulty. The Kazori soldiers switched to manual systems, each action now relying on the precise timing and coordination of individual crews. And though they were making headway, it was clumsy, far from the seamless, deadly efficiency that had defined their past conquests. In the command room on Earth, Tessa noticed the Kazori shift and immediately felt a surge of admiration for their adaptability. It was a tactical move, a sign that Rikael was no ordinary adversary. She glanced at Sharma. "They're pulling back on automation. We're going to have to step up our game, Ben." Sharma nodded, a glint of challenge in his eyes. "I was hoping they would. We're not done surprising them yet." As he initiated a new sequence, the viral veil pivoted, shifting to infiltrate the Kazori's manual systems. Each subtle interference now targeted their power cycles and heat management, throwing them off balance at every turn. Tessa watched the screen, her heartbeat steady as she took in the scene of confusion spreading anew through the Kazori ranks. Then, suddenly, the comms crackled to life. A brief pause, then a low, measured voice filtered through, "Commander Rikael." "Commander Lee." His voice was smoother than expected, his tone almost respectful. "You've demonstrated resourcefulness. I grant you that. But know that it will not be enough. My soldiers are prepared to give everything to secure your world." Tessa paused, sensing an opportunity in his words. "Tell me, Commander Rikael, what is it about Earth that makes you so eager to destroy us?" There was a beat of silence before he responded, a hint of uncertainty bleeding into his tone. "You are a threat. Not in strength or numbers, but in unpredictability. Your existence is disruptive." Tessa felt a strange, somber pride in his words. Disruptive. It was something Earth's history knew all too well. A planet that had risen from every setback, time and again, through the sheer force of will. She leaned forward, her voice carrying the steady weight of her conviction. Perhaps, Commander, it's time to reconsider how you define strength. Rikael's silence was telling, his hesitation lingering as if her words had lodged somewhere uncomfortable. Finally, he replied, his voice softer. It may already be too late for that. And with that, the line went dead. Tessa released a slow breath, her gaze fixed on the screen. Around her, the room buzzed with anticipation, the crew realizing they'd struck a nerve. The Kazori ships continued to drift, struggling with the viral veil's adaptations. Tessa could feel the tension in the air, the weight of so many lives depending on the gamble she had taken. But beneath that tension was something more, a quiet, unbreakable resolve that had brought humanity to this moment. She looked to her crew, their faces lit by the screens, each one a mixture of fear and fierce determination. "We don't back down," she said, her voice clear. "No matter what they throw at us." Her words sank into them, solidifying the unspoken bond they shared. They were all in this together, bound not by duty alone but by a deeper, unwavering belief that the human spirit was, and always would be, indomitable. As she prepared for the next phase, Tessa knew that the real battle was only beginning. And she felt ready for it, with the whole of humanity standing alongside her, as they had always done in the face of the impossible. The dim lights in the United Earth Defense Command room glowed softly against the grim faces of the crew. They had scored a blow against the Kazori, one that had sent shockwaves through the fleet, but the atmosphere was tense. Tessa could feel it, the weight of waiting for retaliation. She scanned the room, catching the nervous glances that passed between her officers. Her own calm was a mask, well practiced and carefully maintained, but even she knew that this brief moment of calm was an illusion. The Kazori would not give up so easily. The calm sparked to life with a notification, a signal pulsing on the screen. Sharma looked up from his console, brow creased. "Commander, it's the Kazori flagship. It's moving into an offensive formation. They've reactivated all weapons, and they're targeting civilian satellites." Tessa's jaw clenched, a hot spike of anger flaring in her chest. The Kazori were doing exactly what she had hoped they wouldn't, resorting to attacking non-military assets to create chaos, to make Earth feel vulnerable. "Patch them into our monitoring grid," she ordered. "I want every movement tracked. We'll need to think quickly if they make any sudden advances on the ground." Sharma's hands flew over his controls, his brow furrowing with concentration. "The viral veil can destabilize them again, but they've shifted to manual operations. If they start targeting critical infrastructure, there's only so much we can interfere with before risking civilian lives." Tessa took a breath, steadying herself. A more brutal commander might have disregarded the danger to Earth's non-combatants, but not her. This was why they were fighting, after all, for the freedom and safety of everyone, not just the military. She wouldn't sacrifice that principle now, not when it mattered most. As she weighed her options, the comms console lit up again. "Commander." Corporal Nevis spoke, his voice wavering. "Incoming broadcast from the Kazori flagship. They're broadcasting on an open channel." The screen blinked, shifting to the ominous interior of the Kazori flagship's bridge. There, framed by the dark metal and harsh lighting, was Commander Rikael. His eyes held a dark gleam as he leaned forward, his face twisted in a fierce, almost primal determination. "Commander Lee," he began, his tone cutting through the room with cold resolve. "You've proven yourselves cunning, for a species with such limited resources. But your resistance ends now. I will grant you a final chance to surrender. Resist further, and we will tear your world apart, piece by piece, starting with your so-called innocence." Tessa stared back at him, her expression unreadable. But inside she felt a fire kindling, a rage born not of fear, but of resolve. Rikael was not only challenging their strength, he was challenging their humanity. He saw their compassion as weakness, their desire to protect as a vulnerability to exploit. "No," she replied firmly, her voice echoing through the silent command room. "We won't surrender." You may destroy our satellites, shatter our networks, but you will never break our will. Rikael's eyes narrowed, his gaze a dark storm of contempt and something else, something like frustration. He opened his mouth to speak, but Tessa cut him off. You have misjudged us, she continued. We may be young among the stars, but make no mistake, we will not bow to tyranny. Do your worst, Rikael, and we will answer with everything we have. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the room in silence. The tension was palpable, a quiet tremor in the air as every officer absorbed her words, the unyielding promise they held. Commander, Sharma spoke softly, breaking the silence. The viral veil. I can amplify it, but it would mean risking a system overload. We could disrupt their targeting systems completely, but the strain might leave us vulnerable if they counter. Tessa met his gaze, the weight of his suggestions sinking in. To push the viral veil further was risky. It would take every ounce of energy and focus they had. But what was the alternative? To let Rikael believe he could control them, bend their will? No. She wouldn't allow that. Do it, she said firmly. Push it to the limit. If we're going to face them, we'll do it with everything we've got. Sharma nodded, his face set in grim determination. He turned back to his console, fingers dancing across the controls. The viral veil surged, a silent ripple extending outward as it tangled with the Kazori systems. Tessa watched the screens, her heart pounding as she saw the effects manifest. On the Kazori flagship, Rikael's image reappeared, his expression one of dawning horror as his systems flickered, their targeting suddenly scrambled, his ships spinning out of alignment once more. It was working. The viral veil was wreaking havoc, twisting their weapons systems in unpredictable ways, causing them to fire wildly, some lasers striking their own ships. The Kazori bridge was chaos. Rikael's soldiers stumbled, their movements erratic as they grappled with failing controls. His voice rang out, sharp and panicked, issuing orders in quick succession, but to no avail. Tessa could see the cracks in his once unshakable facade, the creeping realization that he had misjudged his enemy. In the command room, there was a murmur of awe as the crew watched the fleet unravel. The viral veil was more than just code, it was a silent, relentless force, powered by humanity's collective resolve, by their refusal to bend. But then, a warning flashed on Tessa's screen, a crimson alert that stole the breath from her lungs. Commander, Sharma's voice was taut. They're initiating a planetary strike. Manual override. They're targeting major cities directly. A chill gripped her. This was Rikael's last move, his desperation incarnate. He was willing to scorch the earth if it meant proving his power. She had no choice. Prepare countermeasures, she ordered, her voice ironclad. Redirect all resources. This is it. The bridge flared with activity, every officer pouring their focus into the task. They diverted the viral veil, targeting the specific systems that powered the planetary cannons, racing against time to neutralize the threat. In those moments, Tessa's mind was a quiet storm. She knew the stakes, the lives depending on them. Images of families, of children, of the cities that stretched across Earth's landscapes filled her mind, each one a reason to keep fighting, to find a way through. The Kazori cannons powered up, brightening with a deadly hum. Rikael's face reappeared, his expression a mask of fury. You could have surrendered, he spat. Now watch as your world burns. But as the cannons reached peak energy, something shifted. The viral veil took hold, latching onto the cannons' cores, disrupting their power feed. The energy surged, uncontrolled, and with a blinding flash, the cannons misfired, sending beams of energy spiraling harmlessly into the void. A stunned silence followed. On the screen, Rikael's face twisted in disbelief, the truth settling over him like a shroud. He had lost. Back in the command room, Tessa allowed herself a breath, a single, shaky breath as the weight lifted. They had done it. The Kazori had tried to force them to yield, to break their spirit. But humanity had proven itself unbreakable, resilient, and defiant. She turned to her crew, her voice steady. We're still here, she said, the words carrying the strength of every heart in that room. "We are still here." And in the silence that followed, a murmur of relief, of awe, filled the room. They had faced the impossible and held the line. Earth had not surrendered, and in the eyes of every officer there, humanity's place among the stars had been forged anew. The silence in the United Earth Defense Command room was thick with disbelief, the weight of their victory settling in. Screens showed the shattered remnants of the Kazori fleet, flickering with the last traces of malfunctioning energy fields and twisted weaponry. The viral veil had done its work, leaving Earth's would-be conquerors humiliated, their fleet scattered like ashes on the wind. Tessa took a slow, steadying breath, her fingers finally easing from the rigid grip she'd maintained on the console. Around her, her officers were cautiously coming out of their daze, sharing glances that held more than just relief. They held respect, awe, and the light of something stronger, a rekindled faith in their resilience. Dr. Sharma, whose quick thinking had been the cornerstone of their defense, slumped back in his chair, exhaustion finally overtaking his adrenaline. We did it," he whispered, almost as if speaking aloud would jinx the moment. Tessa gave him a smile, one filled with exhaustion but unbreakable pride. "Yes," she replied softly. "We did." But before anyone could relax fully, Corporal Nevis turned, his face pale. "Commander, incoming communication from the Kazori flagship. It's him." All eyes turned to Tessa. They knew that Rikael had been pushed to his limit. And a cornered enemy, especially one with the pride of a Kazori, was the most dangerous of all. Tessa held up her hand, nodding for Nevis to open the line. The screen crackled to life, and there he was, Rikael, no longer the image of brutal Kazori confidence, but a man worn down, his face a mix of anger and begrudging respect. Behind him, his bridge was chaos. Officers barked out desperate commands, their once pristine uniforms stained and their faces etched with exhaustion. It was clear that this was a man who had tasted his first true defeat. "Commander Tessali," Rikael began, his voice hoarse but steady. "You have defied us in ways I could never have anticipated. I do not pretend to understand it. Your world is young, fragile. Yet you refuse to yield, even in the face of annihilation." Tessa met his gaze, unflinching. She could see the depths of his confusion, the shock of a lifetime of unchallenged supremacy shattered in the course of a single encounter. And yet, in that confusion, she saw a glimmer of something she hadn't expected, an opening, the faintest spark of recognition that his understanding of strength and power might have been flawed. "We are young," Tessa replied evenly, her voice carrying the steady, quiet pride of humanity. "But don't mistake that for weakness. Our strength lies in more than weapons or numbers. It lies in our will to protect what we love, in our refusal to bend to tyranny." Rikael's eyes narrowed, a flicker of respect sparking amidst his frustration. "You speak of peace," he said, the words seeming almost foreign on his tongue. "But you've demonstrated mastery of war. Tell me, Earthling, do you offer peace simply because you lack the strength to conquer?" Tessa's gaze softened, and in her voice was a depth that Rikael had never encountered among his own kind. "We offer peace not out of weakness, but because we understand the cost of war. We do not wish to destroy, but if we must fight to defend our world, we will do so without hesitation. But it doesn't have to be that way, Commander Rikael. You and your people have families, lives worth protecting. Is conquest truly worth the cost of lives?" Rikael stared, visibly grappling with the weight of her words. In his world, power was everything. Mercy, compassion, these were not traits of a true warrior. But in her calm defiance, he sensed a depth that went beyond mere tactics. For the first time, he was faced with the idea that strength could be defined not by the destruction one could wield, but by the willingness to protect. He looked away briefly, the conflict within him clear. His pride, his honor as a Kazori commander, demanded vengeance. And yet the possibility that he might lose more ships, more soldiers, seemed to weigh on him in a way that surprised even him. "What would you have me do, Commander Lee?" he asked, his voice carrying the edge of someone standing on the precipice. Tessa's response was immediate, unwavering. Withdraw. Return to your people. Your soldiers have families, just like ours. Take them home. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, as if he had expected her to demand his surrender, his submission. But here was humanity's final act of defiance, not a demand for victory, but an offer of peace. After a long silence, Rikael gave a slow, reluctant nod. You may think this a victory, Commander, but know that I do not forget my losses lightly. Yet, I see now that you are not the insignificant threat I once believed. I will withdraw, but this is not over. And with that, the screen flickered out, leaving Tessa and her team in a silence that seemed to stretch through every corner of the command room. They had won, not with overwhelming force, but with resilience, intelligence, and an unyielding refusal to compromise their humanity. As the tension in the room ebbed, a murmur of disbelief broke out, soft voices trading relief and awe. Tessa allowed herself a quiet moment, her gaze resting on the flickering remnants of the Kazori fleet on the monitors. They were leaving, a humbled, scattered group of ships limping away, a galaxy forever changed by the tenacity of a small blue planet and its people. Dr. Sharma approached her, his face a mix of exhaustion and profound admiration. I don't think they'll underestimate us again. Tessa managed a small smile, one filled with quiet pride. Good. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned that strength isn't measured in firepower alone. Around her, the crew slowly began to cheer, their voices rising from whispers of disbelief to full-throated exclamations of triumph. And though there was still much to be done, much to rebuild and restore, in that moment, Tessa knew they had not just defended Earth, they had forged a new path forward for humanity among the stars. The next day, news of the Kazori defeat spread through Earth's networks, sparking celebrations from city streets to quiet homes. Humanity had proven that it could not only survive in a hostile galaxy but thrive, bringing its unique strength to the table. The United Earth Defense received messages from alien species they had never spoken to before, some offering congratulations, others merely curious about the mysterious humans who had bested the mighty Kazori. As Tessa watched the reports, she felt a profound satisfaction settle over her. This was more than just a victory. It was the dawn of a new chapter, a first step toward a future where humanity would stand not as conquerors, but as protectors, fierce and steadfast in their commitment to peace. In the quiet of her quarters that night, Tessa allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. They had stood on the brink and come through unbroken. And as she looked up at the stars, she knew that humanity's journey among them had only just begun.